Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know my audience here is mostly Flutter and Firebase, but there are so many cool technology out there that we have to explore with each other. And yes, you read that right in the title that today we will be exploring Supabase, the open source alternative to Firebase. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. Now, I love Firebase databases. They are very quick and easy to set up. They allow you to use collections, which are like key value pairs of data. However, there are times when NoSQL or document-based storages may be a bit problematic for the kind of data that you want to store. And that's when relational databases makes more sense for you. And that is why Supabase can be the right use case for you because they offer PostgreSQL, which is a relational database management system. And of course, they allow you to use SQL commands, which are so powerful for complex operations. And it is pretty quick and easy to set up if you are using the free tier, and I will be showing you how, but you can also self-host it on Docker if you like that. And of course, the great thing about Supabase is that it does not lock you in like proprietary services like Firebase and AWS, etc. And that means no vendor lock-in. So without wasting more time, let me just show you the dashboard and how we can create a very first project, a very first databases, and how we use the Flutter plugin to interact with the database from Flutter apps. And here we are at the Supabase dashboard. Once you have logged in with GitHub, you can create a new project and name it anything. Here I'm adding it chat client and add a strong database password. Then you can choose your region where most of your users are going to be based in, and then add a pricing plan, and then you can create your very first project on Supabase. Once you have landed on the project page, you will find a lot of views, which is going to be for table editor, SQL editor, database, authentication, storage, edge functions, etc. You also have the project API keys and the project configuration URLs here at the dashboard, which is going to be useful for you to connect your Flutter app with the Supabase project. Now let's talk about how we can actually connect to our Supabase project from a Flutter application. Let me give you an idea of how the video is going to be like. We're not going to be building an entire Flutter application from scratch, like the UI, the logic, the classes, everything. No, we will be only exploring the Supabase APIs that is there in the current Flutter stable plugin. And I guess you are right now in a great stage of your learning journey, and you will be able to figure out how to add that knowledge or how to basically use these APIs in your Flutter application. So once you have your very first project and Supabase already added to your PubSpec, you can go ahead and add supabase.initialize and await on it because it is going to be an async function. It is going to take two parameters, which is going to be the URL, which is the Supabase configuration URL that you will find in your dashboard, and also the anon key, which is also something that you can find in your dashboard. And of course, you are going to add the async key to your method because this is going to wait on a function, and that means this void main has to be an async function as well. And also called the widgets flutter bindings initialize method because you are adding a native plugin to your Flutter application and it will be required in your void main. Now, once you have initialized Supabase, you can basically start using the instance of the Supabase class, which is going to be supabase.instance.client. This is a singleton instance. That means that you can create this as many times as you want, and it will give you only one instance throughout the project. Basically, you can have this instance in as a global variable wherever you want, but that may not be a great architecture for your application. So I would suggest to add it to a class that probably something that is database service. And of course, to make this class more testable, you can have this client being added to other constructor and remove the instance creation inside the class. So now your database service is created. We will create something similar like maybe an auth service. Now that means that we can start working with authentication, and let's explore how easy it is to actually build authentication services with Supabase. So in the authentication service class, we will be doing some generic methods like how to sign in the user, listening to the auth status, or getting a method that tells you if the user is logged in to the current session or not, and of course signing out the user as well. However, today we are going to be exploring how we can do authentication with email OTPs, which means that the user is going to give an email to the device and we are going to send an OTP to that email, and we have to verify that OTP is correct or not. That means it is not just like one sign-in user method, you will also have a verify OTP method as well, which is going to verify the OTP given by the user. Now let's talk about the sign-in user thing and see how easy or hard it is. So you have a sign-in user method, which is going to be a future of void function, and you can take a parameter for the user email, which is where the OTP is going to be sent, and then you can basically do client.auth.signin with OTP, and that's the method that is available currently in the Flutter plugin. And of course, this sign in with OTP is going to get the same parameter for the user email. So Supabase is going to do their magic and send an OTP to this email ID. And of course, you got to wait on it because this is an async function. Now, usually in your Supabase project, email authentication will be enabled by default, but you can check it in your dashboard as well and check all the properties that are enabled and disabled, and if you want to change any of these values. And of course, there are phone authentication, Google authentication, etc. that you can play with later after this. Once you're here in the authentication tab, there is something called email templates, which has templates of the email body that you're going to send to your users. And go to the magic link tab, and instead of confirmation URL, add the .token variable, which is going to be the OTP. Confirmation URL is like the magic link that a user can be sent to or redirected to, and they will be automatically logged in. But the token is for OTP. So now probably you have built the front end of your chat application, and you probably have a button that is going to be signing the user with the given email. Once that button is clicked, it will trigger Supabase to send an OTP to that given user email ID. And currently the email body is going to look something like this for the user. So now the user can just get the OTP and add it to your front end of your application, and now you can start verifying the OTP, which we are going to explore in the next 3 seconds. And here we have the verify OTP method, which is going to be also a future of void function, and the parameters are going to be the user email and the OTP value. And once you have got those values, you can basically call the auth instance again and call the verify OTP method on it, and give the user email, the OTP, and also something called an OTP type, which is going to be .magic link for this certain scenario. There are other types as well, like for recovery OTP or some phone OTP or whatever it is. You can check it out in the enum for OTP type. And once this verify OTP is called, it will let you know with an error or a success message with some details of the user and the token, etc. Now for any software, there is an input and there is an output. Or for application, you can say that you get some data, you send some data. So it's always like a transaction. That means that in your login page, you're basically sending your email or OTP details to a system, and the system is sending back your authentication status if it's logged in or not. So if the OTP is wrong, you warn the user, and if the OTP is right, you take them inside your beautiful application. So we either get the current authentication status or we want to fetch the current session data. For now, we are going to proceed and figure out how we can listen to the authentication state changes. So here we have the listen to auth status, and again on the instance of auth, we are going to call the method on auth state change and listen to the data changes of authentication right in this block of code. So we can also return this, and basically this will be a stream subscription of auth state class. However, let's go into the listen block where we get the current information represented by data. And inside this data, we can get session details, which is going to be data.session, and also auth change event, which is going to be data.event. Now, how do we basically work with this? That we can actually, add a switch case for the auth change event. And the switch cases are going to be like for signed in. And here we can check if the session details or the session data is not null. That means the user is successfully signed in. And at this point, you can basically handle the sign-in logic or whatever that you want to do. And there are other auth change events as well, which is like for password recovery or for signed out statuses, and there are others, etc., that you can check out in the documentation. Now, of course, we also want to check at certain places of your application. If the user is logged in, then we allow them to do X, or we don't. In this case, we just get the instance of auth and call the current session variable and see if this current session is null. That means that this user is not logged in, and if it's not null, it is logged in. So you can basically just return this Boolean value in this method. And of course, the final method, which is for logging out, and it's a simple sign out method on the auth instance. And that was super simple, I feel, but also pretty out of the box, right? But let's talk about the one thing that Supabase is really famous for, which is databases. So imagine you building a chat app. Oh, what an original idea. And of course, you want your messages to be in real time, so we are going to be exploring real-time databases by Supabase. But first, let's build our table in our Supabase dashboard. You can use the SQL commands to create a table from the SQL editor. However, I know that most of my audience is front-end, so they are not so hands-on with SQL commands. So I'm going to be using the table editor to create a table in the dashboard. So here we are at the table editor of the Supabase project. Here you can create a new table and give it a name. In this case, it's going to be the messages table, and you can also add an optional description. Make sure to enable the row level security for the RLS policy. And since this table is going to be real time, make sure to enable that as well. Now, what other columns do we need for this table? We have the ID and created at for the timestamp. We also need the message column because that is what it's going to store the actual message content, and the type for this is going to be text. And here we have to define what the default value is going to be. Will it be null or an empty string? In the extra options, if you check, this column can be nullable, so you can definitely check that. Also, we add another column which is for the author ID, which is going to be an integer, and it's going to store the author who actually sent that message. In the extra option, this is not going to be nullable because there has to be one author ID for sure. And yes, we are creating our very first table for our very first Supabase project. Now from the dashboard itself, you can create your very first row. Of course, you can do the same thing from the application as well, but we just want to have some populated data at this point of time. So here you can add your author ID because the ID is auto-populated, and of course the message, which is going to be very custom, I'm sure. And of course, even the date and time is also going to be auto-populated. So yes, you have your very first row in your very first table of your very first project of Supabase. So let's get into the code and how we can actually integrate this with the APIs of the Flutter plugin. So now we have the database service. Previously we had the authentication service, and this will have our very first method, which is going to be listening to the chat messages because we want to get a real-time update of whenever there is a new chat for a particular condition. So we have our listen to chat messages method in our database service, which is going to be listening to all the updates on the messages table for a given condition, for a given user, etc. So first we need to get the instance, and from there you can do .from, and in from you can basically define your table name, which is going to be in this case messages, and then you have something called .stream, which is basically saying that I'm going to be streaming this messages table here, and here in this stream you are going to be adding a parameter for the primary key, which in this case is the ID, and then you basically can listen to the stream of messages from this message table. Now this listen block actually gives you a callback method, which is basically going to give you the data that you require from this table. In this case, it's going to be a list of data, and this list is going to be a map of string of dynamic. And inside this listen block, you can do whatever you want to with this data. You parse the data and you can display it in the UI. Now, when you actually try to run this, you are not going to get any messages from this table, and that is because your RLS policies are enabled. However, you have not defined any policy for this particular table. So let's get to the dashboard again and define some policy for how or what kind of data can be fetched from this table. Here at the table editor in the dashboard, you see in the top right, no active RLS policies. Now here you can choose to disable RLS completely for this table, and that means that anybody can fetch any rows from this table, or you can choose to create a new policy which will decide how and who can access data from this table. Now you can create it from scratch or from a template. I will choose templates. And here in the templates, you see one for enabling read access to everyone. So if you want to use that, or if you can check the second one, which says enabling insert access for authenticated users only. Now that kind of fits our use case. So we can basically use this template and modify some of it. So instead of insert, we can choose select operation because we want read access, and return true because there is no expression. Also change the policy name, and then you can submit for review. Now after enabling the policy, if you run the listen method, you will get all the previous messages and any new message that gets added to the database after you are running the application, which means that anytime there's a new message in the table and it matches your condition, it will notify your client, which is your Flutter application, and then you can do whatever you want to do with that data, display it in the UI or notify the user, etc. Let's see that in action. So here from the dashboard itself, I'm going to be adding another message. Again, ID is auto-populated, user ID is some random user ID, and I will add a custom message here. And of course, created at is also auto-populated. So once I save this, there will be a notification on my client. If you can see, I actually added a debug point here. And if you see, the last message is the new message that I had added from the dashboard. Now that was seamless and latency wasn't an issue either. Now Supabase allows a lot of filters and modifiers as well. For example, once your app scales, you're going to have loads of messages and you do not want to load all of them at once when the user opens your application. So that means that you want to limit the rows that you want to call for that particular call, which will limit your responses and make sure that your payload size is also controlled. So like we have this stream method, and after stream you can basically just call the limit and add a number here and say that you only want 3 responses at a time. Now of course, either you can call this method in your init state of your widget, or you can actually return this stream of data, and this can actually be used or called by your stream builder later, and you can work with the data of the UI once you have any kind of change in the messages table. Now Supabase allows a number of features under Realtime. One is broadcast, where you can basically send messages from one client to another with low latencies. Another is a presence feature, which can track and synchronize shared state between multiple clients. And also we have Postgres changes that can also be notified to the users in case you want to notify users whenever there is any kind of addition in a particular table. You want to notify all the users for it, or a particular set of users. Let's check that in action, where we basically have a notification method that lets us know whenever an insert has happened on the messages table. Notify on insert method, we get the client instance and call the channel method on it, which takes a schema and the table name, in this case public colon messages. Then we call the on method on it, which takes a listen type, a channel filter, and a callback method. The first one, which is the listen type, is going to be Postgres changes because we are listening to the database changes here. And then we have the channel filter here, where you can define what event you're listening for. So in this case, we have the insert operation, and then the schema, and then the table name. And then you have a callback method, which basically provides you the payload data. And on this block of code, you can do whatever you want to do once that insert operation has happened. So either you basically send a toast to the user, or like change the UI somehow, whatever you want to do. And finally, you subscribe on this call, and that's it. You can call this method from any of your init state, and it will notify you whenever there is an insert operation happening on the messages table. Now our database service has a lot of real-time methods. That means means that we are getting a stream of data from these tables. However, what if we have scenarios where we only need like a one-time fetch? Like suppose we want to fetch a list of the start messages for this particular user. We don't really need it in real time, right? So we need a one-time fetch API, and of course Supabase allows you that as well. So now we have a method called fetch start messages, which will again call the messages table, and it will in this case call the select method because we want to like fetch and read data only. And if you do not have any parameter in the select method, it will mean that you need all the data from your table, all the columns I mean. But if you specify a certain column inside the select method, it will only give you the data of that particular column. And of course on top you can add an equal method which is going to check the condition for the data that you need. So in this case we want to check if there is a column called is starred and the value is true. In this case I only want those rows which are starred as true. And of course you await on this because this is an async method, and you get back a list of data which you can work with, parse it and do whatever you want to do with it. Now from the dashboard we can create a new column called starred and give it an optional description. And the type is going to be a boolean, which means that it will take either true or false and not null. So we have to uncheck allow nullable here and give it a default value for false. Now you can save it and you will see that all the rows are auto-populated with false. From the dashboard itself, we can basically change some of the values to true so that we get some data when we call the fetch method. Now here from the client app, when we run this method, you will notice that there are two data, the two items are actually appearing, which are the ones that we have changed from the dashboard. Now, if you go into the reference page of the Supabase Flutter plugin, you will find a lot of different filters and modifiers that is allowed by the plugin. But of course, Supabase allows you to play with all the CRUD operations and not just read, because till this time we've only been working with the read operations. And also while we are adding a message, we're doing it via the dashboard, but you can do it all by your client app as well. And of course, when you are doing the start messages, you are going to notify the database that make this true or false, and that will be an update operation on an existing row. And you can do it something like this. You have your star message method, which is going to take the value if it's going to be start as true or false, and the user ID, because you need to know which row that you want to update. So in this case, you again call the client from the messages table, and here instead of select, you're going to be doing an update property and mention what is the new value that you want it to update to. And of course, it needs to have a condition, which is it only updated for the user ID where it matches with this given X user ID. So definitely with an update, you need to have a match property as well. That was it for today's video. I had a lot of fun exploring Supabase and also working with PostgreSQL after a very long time. And the fact that it was super quick and easy to set up was a cherry on the cake. So if you have worked with Supabase before, then let me know your experience in the comments below so that we can let the team know about it and they can work on it based on your suggestions. And of course, if you've liked the video, then definitely do like it, because that makes me very happy. And of course, share it with your friends. That makes me happier. And maybe subscribe to my channel, because that will make me the happiest. And have a great day and a great learning, and I will see you in the next video.